Welcome to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Cooper Smith, a doctorate prepared nurse practitioner, and this show is about empowering you to live a radiant, healthy, and balanced life. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, Angela Lenhardt. She is an intuitive life coach and the author of two best selling inspirational books about hope, healing, and miracles. And we'll talk more about that during the show. So, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning, Dr. Amy, and thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Me too. And I've shared with my listeners, I love interviewing authors and I love reading all kinds of different things. And I did get the chance to read one of your books that we'll share with our listeners. But first, I wanted to ask you, what is an intuitive life coach?
I help people navigate through their life when they are going through challenges and may need some insight and clarity on how to successfully get through that obstacle so they can get from the part where they're challenged and stuck to victory.
Yes. So, what are some signs that somebody might be stuck?
I think that i- we become paralyzed in fear when we don't exactly know how to approach a challenge, or we have a goal and we need help to navigate through what is creating some anxiety, maybe some depression. I think um those emotions
Mm,
are huge indicators on whether or not we are stuck on our path. So we need some help to find our way through that, and tools on how to overcome those challenges.
yeah. So, if we're faced with some sort of life decision or transition and we're just feeling everyone knows that anxious feeling and the heart racing and just unrested.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a sign that we're just stuck and we need some help clearing the negative energy.
Absolutely. We are energetic beings. We are
Mm,
spiritual beings having a human experience. And there is so much going on, especially at this time in the world with all the current events. And if we don't take time every day to sit with ourselves and quiet the mind, we become overwhelmed with the noise in the world.
mm,
And when we don't have that space to have silence and to be able to connect with ourselves, then it's virtually impossible to hear that voice of intuition, your higher wisdom. That is always the voice, that inner knowing that guides us to how to move, how to take that next step. But without silencing the mind, without getting quiet, it's virtually impossible to know which direction to go, because then we fall into that pattern of operating off of sabotage, like old behaviors, sabotaging thoughts, and that isn't necessarily the right path.
gotcha. So when you say intuition, is that your inner voice, inner feelings? How do you define that?
It's intuition is God speaking to you.
Mm,
It's that's how I interpret it. That's how I live my life. That is how I've written the two books and have
yes.
done what I have done, is through my intuition, which is definitely powered up by the Holy Spirit. So it's I think that there are different uh, ways on listening to your intuition. And when people are first getting, in touch with, okay, what is my intuition? What is my intuition, and what is speaking to me? It's getting in tune with your body, because uh, your body knows before the mind knows. So it's getting in tune with your body,
Yep.
and feeling what is starting to constrict, like the lower back sends
Mm,
messages, the heart sends messages, the lungs, the brain, the legs, the feet. those are all indicators on whether or not you are moving in the right direction. So when we become constricted and tight and feel out of breath, take that into consideration, that you need to stop and reevaluate the situation before you proceed forward.
Yeah.
So use your body as the compass to give you clarification on whether you or not you're moving in the right direction. And that, I think, that is one of the first steps in honing your intuitive skills and getting in touch with what your intuitive voice is saying. And from there you can become more in tune with the different signs, like as far as clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, on how the universe is speaking to you, how to hone that voice, whether or not it's the inner ear speaking to you, or maybe it's the voice of fear. So I think that there are different levels, or um, I really don't know a way to say it, but a different there are different dimensions on how to get in tune with your intuition.
So you just mentioned fear. So how can a person tell, sometimes like we have that bad feeling and, how do we tell if that's intuition or if we're just afraid that we might succeed and then we feel fear?
That's a great question. Um, Most of the time, fear will. We all have fear. Every single
Yeah.
one of us experiences fear. It's part of the human experience. It's not allowing fear to keep you stuck and prevent you from moving forward. So how do you know if it's fear? Um, First of all, the my body freezes up. So I know if it's fear and my body will become stuck. But then I think to myself, what is this representing right now? What kind of situation am I in? For instance, I can share a story. So there was a time when I was walking my dogs and I needed to jump in and rescue another dog, a stranger's dog. And this was in the middle of winter and break ice, and
Oh my
I put
goodness.
my life on the line to do that. Okay, so this is how I can teach through experiences. So before I l- jumped into the reservoir, I knew intuitively, I knew that I could swim. So first of all, first and foremost, I knew that I could swim, and I know that I'm super passionate about dogs, and I will do anything to save an animal. So I have that drive within me. So before I leapt into the reservoir, I said, "Okay, God, we've got to do this." And I root myself in so much faith in God that I allow his power, his energy to move through me. So when I make that choice to jump into the reservoir, that I allow him to propel me forward. So that is how I overcome fear. It isn't that I wasn't afraid to jump in the reservoir, and I knew that I was putting my own life on the line, but I trust in God so much that allowed him to move me. So fear is always part of the equation, but in that split second, you have got to root yourself so deeply in God and in trust in God that you allow God to move you. That is how I can best
Yeah.
explain how to navigate through fear.
Right. So having faith.
Faith, absolutely.
Yeah.
Faith in whatever is in front of you was put there for a particular reason. And
Right.
whether it's to serve another person, or maybe it's to serve an animal, or maybe it's just to hold space for whatever experience is showing up, that if you look at it as it was divinely organized, you are put there for a reason. Therefore, you cannot allow fear to move you. You allow love to move you.
Yeah. So you mentioned in your book, I had the opportunity to read A Charmed Journey,
Okay.
an inspired guide to personal transformation. And I loved it. You were so open about sharing stories from your personal life, and about how earlier you mentioned having signs, divine intervention that helped move you in certain directions.
That is when I wrote that book at a time in my life where when I needed to change my life. I was in the throes of it, and I my life up until that point had been just, it feels like one big train wreck after another, and I continuously attracted, relationships and situations that weren't serving me, and I wanted so badly to change my life and to transform it in a way that would feed my life purpose and my soul. And I was in a toxic relationship, and it was one day when I was walking to the tub, and I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the person staring back on me. And so when I sat into the tub, I just sat there and I just said, God, I need your help. And I kid you not, there was a force that pushed me out of the tub, wrapped a towel around my body. I walked up the stairs, and at the time I said to my boyfriend, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. And he says, well, I've drained your accounts. He drained me
Mm.
emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually on every single
Yeah.
level. And I was at the bottom. And he says, well, I've drained your accounts. And I said, that's okay. I said, I can, I'm gonna make it somehow. And I packed my bags. I got into my car and I began to drive to the park because I was thinking that, you know, I don't know where to begin again, but I'll just begin in the park. And in that moment, I pulled my car over, and I began to beat my steering wheel and cry and cuss and swear like a sailor. And I said, God, I said, here I've studied all of these techniques. I've been around the world, and now you want me to actually live this. I was, up until that point, I was giving advice, and now I had to take my own advice. And as I was on this the just the side of the road, I said, I don't know what to do. And I was crying, crying, crying. And all of a sudden, the small, still voice that you hear about, well, that came in to my car. I literally saw it. And it took over my steering wheel and it drove me to a house. And when I got to this particular house, I wasn't sure where I was, but I got out of my car anyway, and I walked to the front door and I knocked. And it was my very first client that I had in my life that had told me that if I ever needed a place to go, their house was always opened. And that is where I began my life, or that is where I began to transform my life. And that particular day, I walked into their house, I laid on the bed, and I said, God, I'll do whatever it takes to change my life. Just tell me what I need to do. And he gave me instructions. He told me that I needed to take total responsibility for my life. I needed to understand the role that I was playing in each and every situation. And then I needed to have gratitude. I needed to have extreme gratitude for everything, and that holding any resentments or anger towards the situation was not going to get me to where I wanted to go. And then the fourth thing was I needed to write a book about it. So that is the day that A Charm Journey was born. And I had no idea how to write a book or who to call to help write a book. I didn't have the resources to write a book. And I followed God's voice and did what he told me to do. And that is how A Charm Journey began. And then from there, I published it. And then I was able to get Wayne Dyer's endorsement through prayer and listening to my intuition. And we are today on how to transform your life from the inside out.
Yes. Well, what an inspiring story. Um, but I am going to have you hold that thought. We're going to pause for a break from our sponsor. So we're going to hear the rest of the story when we come back. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Cooper Smith, and my guest today is Angela Lenhardt. Before the break, we were talking about Angela's transformative journey and how she came to write her book. And, something you said when you were describing the situation you were in, you were kind of attracting certain relationships that were toxic to you. And I've had friends or acquaintances where they do seem to kind of attract certain things and it happens repeatedly. And I wonder why that is and what they can do about it.
The first thing to do is awareness,
Yeah.
to sit to again to sit with self. And based off of my experiences in the work in doing helping people for 25 plus years, a lot of it stems from our childhood. So when there is
Hmm.
unresolved business with our mom and our dad and our brothers and our sisters and our aunts and uncles, that that is in our soul. So that's internal. And it that energy, those thoughts, those feelings need to be transformed. And that is what a charm journey is about, is that I had to go within, and all the things that I was upset about my and angry with my dad, I began to attract in my relationships. So it was because of my unfinished business with my dad is why I attracted the relationships I did. The unresolved issues that I had with my mom, I attracted all the relationships that represented that. So my relationships that I encountered were stemmed from the emotions that I had as a child. And the my entire journey of transforming and healing those parts of myself, the shadow parts, the parts of us that we are ashamed about, or the parts that we have abandoned, those need to be loved. They need to
Yes.
be loved and nurtured, because anytime we suppress that part of self, we shut off pieces of our heart and the parts of us that create and make us whole. And our body, our experience is about loving and accepting all parts of self, all parts of self. And this is why, being rooted in God and is instrumental, is so important to this journey, is because he gets us through these challenging times, or gets us through the challenging times of healing and transformation and then liberation.
Yeah, it's at the point I'm at in my journey as I explore different things and why am I this way and why do I react this way? And it does always come back to childhood.
Yes.
And I grew up in New England and I'm like, really, Amy, your childhood, great. And but you were so right. You have to acknowledge those things
Mhm.
in order
Mhm.
to move on and become the person you're meant to be.
It's like that energy is active.
Yeah.
It sends out a frequency into the universe. We live in a in a electromagnetic field, in a very powerful universe. And when those emotions become predominant in our lives, man, that just sends out a signal, and it
Hmm.
sends out that signal to attract to you what you need to heal. But at the time, it's like, why am I attracting this again? Well, you're attracting it to heal so you can move beyond it. But if we get stuck in it and we don't recognize what we're giving off and why we are attracting it, that is what keeps us in the same experience over and over and over again,
Yeah.
repeating those patterns. And it's a vicious cycle unless you decide that you want to heal so badly that you'll do whatever it takes to change your life. And that is where I had to get and be for quite a bit of time
Yeah.
before I could move beyond it. And it's challenging. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we all have a story, and we can either allow our story to allow us to be continue to be victims forever and ever and ever, and to repeat cycles, and to or we can choose to be the victors of our life, and overcome that.
Yeah. So let's say somebody out there is listening and they're in that cycle and they're stuck. What's a first step they could take?
The first step they could take is to go to the mirror, to literally go to the mirror and do this exercise. Look at yourself in the face, look at yourself in the eyes, and truly walk up to that mirror and say, I love you, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to heal you. That's first step. And then you allow, then you just choose to whatever shows up in your consciousness, intuitively um, shows up in your experience of even strangers off the street, that you trust that God is working so divinely and so organized in your life that you are going to recognize that experience as a teacher, to either teach you to surrender, to accept, to not judge, to forgive. Those are reflections of what you need to work on within yourself.
Mm.
And most of the time, 99% of the time, it comes back to forgiveness, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of parents, of people that have done you wrong in your life. I mean, there, and I get it. I've heard a lot of stories doing the work that I've done for over, 25 years, and it's mind blowing, and it breaks my heart. But forgiveness is the key to transform your life.
I think, and you talk about this in your book as well. When people think about forgiveness, it doesn't mean that you're excusing the behavior, but but you're forgiving so that you can heal.
Yes, it's like forgiveness. If you break it down, it's like forgiving yourself love. Forgiving yourself love. And you forgive. It isn't that you're condoning the experience. It isn't that you uh, are saying that like you deserved it. There was no part of that. It's just that it happened, and I am going to give myself so much love in this moment, and say, this happened to me. I don't know why. I'm just going to breathe in uh, so much love, so much light into my life, that I'm going to allow that light to transform that experience. And when you breathe into it and you allow the light, the sunshine, the energy from the trees, Mother Nature, she's a beautiful healer. Allow all of that to come into your body, into your lungs, into your heart. I I don't know how it happens, but it does. The pain softens. The
Yeah,
pain softens. It doesn't mean that it's ever going to go away and that you're not going to have memories of it. It just means that the pain softens, which allows you to have a little more freedom to walk in this life.
absolutely. And I think you mentioned too, you have to forgive others as well as yourself,
Mhm.
which is hard to do.
Mhm. Mhm. That's why going to the mirror and saying to your is looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, and I will do whatever it takes to heal you, because the journey is healing. The journey is about love and transforming and forgiveness. And
Yes,
if we have never been there and done that and done things the wrong way, we wouldn't know what not to do. So, it's
absolutely.
part of, I'll be the first one to say that I've made I think I've made every mistake out there. I didn't get this far because I've walked the line. Now I'm a little bit more in the within the gates, but I mean, I was from one extreme to the next, and I'm one that likes to live life to the fullest. And I've even probably ran from the cops a few times.
You I think when I look back at hard times and, while of course, while I was going through it, I was just wishing I wasn't. But when you get to the other side of that, at least for me, I'm like, I had to go through that so that
Hmm.
I can appreciate now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, one thing about being older, which, I remember the first time I went through something really difficult, I felt such despair and I'm never going to make it through this. But now that I've been around a little bit, I know
Hmm.
that yes, you are. Yes, this sucks right now, but you are going to make it through it and you'll be better for it.
Right, you're right. If you can just kind of hang in there with an optimistic attitude, and trust that it's part of the process, it's part of the journey. It does make it makes the steps a little bit easier. It does.
Yeah.
And it does have to do with your attitude and how you show up. And like I said, the things that are being reflected back onto you, if you choose to look at those situations as, what is this teaching me? What is this message right now? If you choose to look at it as an opportunity, you will find that there's guidance in that, there is it's divinely orchestrated somehow, some way, that there is always a light, and it's a very narrow channel.
Yes. Well, we're almost out of time. I really enjoyed our conversation and I enjoyed reading your book. And I do recommend that our listeners check that out because there's so much more to your story that we just didn't have time to get to. But how can people learn more about you and to get your books?
I have a website, angelalenhardt.com. My books are available on Amazon. I'm an independent author, so it's I went that direction. They're both located on Amazon. I'm also on social media, so pretty much anywhere that you have a computer or a phone, you can find me and the work that I do, and my books.
All right. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Are there topics you would like to hear about? Please send an email to radiantpodcast2025@gmail.com. Check out past episodes on YouTube. And we're also on Apple Podcasts and all your favorite platforms. I'll be back next Saturday morning at 7:30 with more expert insights and practical strategies to help you live a radiant and healthy life. Until then, here's to your best life.